Michael Yon, we have a mutual friend who's been trying to put us in touch, and we've finally been able to do this on the eve of Christmas. And then right on the edge of interviewing you, which I've been looking forward to very much, I've had some documents sent to me from somebody who was in the New Zealand Defence Force, and they are shocking. They are trying to paint or propagandize to our New Zealand Defence Force, train them into thinking that Christians are terrorist extremists. So I'll get to that in a moment, but welcome in, Michael Yon.
Thank you. I'm actually sitting in Catherine Austin Fitz's studio. This is pretty cool, isn't it?
It's very cool. Could you give, for New Zealanders who don't fully know you, and you are one of the princes on the world stage in terms of your truth-telling, your courage, your call to a better world. That's how I regard you very, very highly. So I'm not surprised you're working with Catherine Austin Fitz at the moment. Could you give New Zealanders a bit of background on you, just what you've done and why you are with her over in the Netherlands at the moment?
Right. So, yeah, I'm in Netherlands. It's quite an interesting place, as you can imagine. I come here fairly often because Netherlands is such an important place. But who am I? I grew up in Florida. I'm an American, although I've spent most of my life out of the United States. I speak English fluently still. But I've been all over the United States in great detail. I was in the U.S. Army and that sort of thing, and stationed in Germany. And anyway, I've traveled extensively around the world. To 99 countries, actually. And about 2/3 of my life, though, has been in places like Asia, Europe, Middle East, wars, that sort of thing. So I've studied quite a lot of subjects over that time. And one of the most important, actually, believe it or not, is cults. Cult making and cults, that's very important to study. As with mathematics, every month that you spend studying math will return several months, at minimum, probably several years, and likewise with the study of cults and brainwashing is absolutely vital to negotiate the constant forever minefield that we're in. But I've studied these sorts of things, and I've studied energy and the causes and the life cycles of wars. And other topics. Now, war is quite an interesting topic. I spent years in kinetic wars, such as Iraq and Afghanistan. I spent 2 years in Afghanistan, 2 years in Iraq, and I wasn't there in the hotels. I was there in combat for most of both of those wars. And so, not most of the wars, because they went on longer than 4 years, but I was in 2 years in each, and most of that time I was actually with combat forces. I was not in the hotels, or very, very little in hotels, maybe 3% max. The rest of the time, combat forces, right? And so, or in Afghanistan, I spent a lot of that time out with villagers, actually, believe it or not. So, but anyway, actually, I had an Afghan taxi driver today, Uber or taxi driver that I used for 2 hours today. Quite interesting. But anyway, so what have I done? Who am I? I've been accurate on predictions of the wars and other related topics for years, and that's why people constantly reach out to me. I've met 3 directors of Central Intelligence Agency who all 3 asked to see me. So, I mean, this is the sort of thing, that would be Petraeus, Gates, and Woosley, right? So, I spent significant time with them during the wars, and not Woosley wasn't during the war, and Gates was Secretary of Defense at that time. But what I'm getting to is that a lot of people have reached out to me over time, including big players like that, because my predictions have been accurate, whether they are on Afghanistan or on Iraq. Or more recently on things like Nord Stream, the destruction of Nord Stream. My wife and I, Masako Ganaha, we saw in advance. I just got off the phone with her, actually. We saw in advance that we thought Nord Stream was going to be destroyed. In fact, we went to Germany several times in that regard. We went to BASF plant in Ludwigshafen, Germany, twice in advance. We actually had bought an extra iPad, that we kept open for, I don't know, the better part of a year, just watching the flows, the cubic meters per second going through Nord Stream. There was a website where you could see the flows going through. Because at one point I was like, Masako, I think sooner or later these numbers are going to go to zero, right? And so we would check it occasionally, or I used to keep it right. I was watching the flows because they would actually fluctuate. It was kind of interesting. I think they fluctuated with things like temperature. Anyway, doesn't matter. But the point
Did
is
anybody listen to your warnings? Were you able to get
oh
that
yeah.
up to a top level?
Well, the top level's the ones that did it,
I know.
but a lot of people listen, especially those who have followed my work for years. Those who followed my work for years know that I often say things that sound crazy, but they don't sound crazy to my long-term readers anymore. They know if I say something, no matter how out there it sounds, just write it in your notes and see when it comes true. Timing is very difficult. But for instance, but Nord Stream. The last time Masako and I were at BASF was 14 days before Nord Stream was destroyed, and
Just tell us what BASF stands for.
That's in 1914 the BASF, or they'll call it BASF, and some people call it BASF. It's a biggest chemical company in the world, right? And in 1914 they started making nitrogenous fertilizers in Ludwigshafen, Germany, using natural gas, right? So using what's called the Haber-Bosch process, they take the hydrogen off the natural gas, combine it with the nitrogen that we're breathing, and make ammonia, make ammonium sulfate, ammonium nitrate, make nitrogenous fertilizers. Very important. Now Ludwigshafen is on the BASF plants in Ludwigshafen on the Rhine River, which is like the Mississippi of Europe, and it dumps right out at Rotterdam, not far from me. And Rotterdam Harbor is the biggest port in Europe, actually, and so the busiest. And so what I'm getting to is we were at BASF because we thought that BASF would be targeted specifically in food supply, specifically taking out Nord Stream. And we were publishing this many, many times. I think I said it on maybe Jordan Peterson's show. Anyway, I'm not sure if I said it there or not. But anyway, I was on a couple times. But at one point, Jordan was over here, and I took him to some farmers in the Netherlands. And on that show, I was with Ava Vlardingerbroek. Ava and I both were in agreement that we thought that they were going to take out Groningen gas field. And many people were saying, well, they're never going to take out Groningen gas field. That's the biggest gas field in Europe. I'm like, hello? That's why they'll take it out. And they did. They closed it down, filled it with concrete, right? And likewise, more recently, roughly a month ago, in Germany, the Germans blew up their last nuclear plant. They blew it up. You can go on YouTube and watch them reducing the cooling towers to rubble. And so this is the deindustrialization of Europe and the United States and other places. And we're literally committing suicide. Now, also, the weaponized migration. I had a taxi driver, Afghan taxi driver that I hired recently, about 4 days ago, and we were together for half an hour or so, and we talked about many things. I got his phone number, and I hired him again today to take me on a 2-hour trip because I needed to go somewhere. I needed to come here actually, and so for that 2 hours we talked about things. And he's from Afghanistan. I spent 2 years in Afghanistan. And he could see it himself. He's like, yes, they're letting us all in. He's like, and he can see the food prices going up and these sorts of things. He sees the destruction of the West through the drugs and whatnot. And the drugs are a huge weapon. Intoxicants in general, whether it be alcohol or, the main way we destroyed the American Indians was not rifles. Those were part of it, but it was actually alcohol. That was the main weapon we used, was alcohol. And so in other places, it'll be opium or something. But in the case of...
sugar is highly addictive. Actually, terrible food as well. Terrible food.
Actually, the Afghan guy, and I stopped today because he has a Tesla and he had to plug the thing in. So we stopped for coffee, and they put a cookie on my saucer. And he said, this is the Afghan man with accent, said, that's got sugar in it. Do not eat that.
Yes.
He goes, that is poison.
It's poison, and it's highly addictive. It's one of the ways they really broke us down in the early days. What we have to get our heads around, actually, before I get to that, the why of this for people who are reeling, just listening. I just want to say to you, here under Jacinda Ardern in New Zealand, we had one of the best oil refineries. It was so good, Michael, that when the Americans would come in to go to Scott Base in the Antarctic, they would fly back and load up on our beautifully refined oil here in New Zealand because it was done to such a high standard. Because New Zealanders are inherently quite inventive, so we'd come up with ways to refine that to such a degree that it was just wonderful and really strong bitumen for the road as well. Jacinda Ardern shut it down for no logical reason, nothing she could give us. So I want New Zealanders who are saying, oh, this is all too much. You are right on the money. They are deindustrializing the West. They are trying to bring us to our knees. And that is the backdrop to everything we're going to talk about today. Why, Michael? Just right from the outset, tell people why. Why would any politician want to hurt their own people, want to see them maimed and prematurely dying, or want to see a thriving Western economy broken? What would be behind that?
Well, when you look at the people in charge, often like Jacinda and Trudeau, Biden, Obama, Trump, they're actually not genius people, right? Trump is smarter than the average person, but not a lot, actually. I mean, he was born on third base, and people are like, well, you know, the guy's so great and all this. He was actually born on the Starship Enterprise on the bridge, basically. I mean, seriously, if you can't take a seat there, then seriously, you just fell off into the engine room or something.
But we're going to talk about silver. He was born with a whole silver set, not just a silver spoon in his mouth.
That's exactly right. And now that silver's worth a lot more as of every day now. So, but when it comes to these people in various countries that I go to, like Mary Lou McDonald over in Ireland, she was the leader of Sinn Féin. Masako and I spent an evening with her and walked around Dublin. I mean, her IQ is like room temperature, right? That's why she was in charge. They're selected for that. Trudeau. I mean, look, Trudeau's just a boy. He's a child in a man's body, right? And as is Trump. He's a boy in an older man's body, in an old man's body now, right?
Jacinda Ardern knocked around doing DJing and was a lightweight, a political absolute lightweight, just on the sidelines, and suddenly she was elevated because she was so pliant and so trained by the WEF. Yep.
That's it. The pliant, and Governor Abbott in Texas and whatnot. The reason that these people are picked is for specific Hollywood type reasons. This is a show, right? It's kayfabe. It's often they'll say, enjoy the show with that Q stuff or whatever, right? It is a show. A lot of it's just a show. Now, people die in this movie because it's a real kinetic movie. People actually die in huge numbers, in terrible deaths. So, but at the end of the day, for the people that are running the information component of this, it is a show. Now, I've been walking around Amsterdam, just as I walk around San Francisco or Washington, D.C., dope everywhere, right? Again, primary weapon in psychological operations is intoxicants, whether that be alcohol or whatever. But again, who am I? The reason that people reach out to me so much, the reason that Catherine reached out was because she also saw the accuracy, right? And then she invited Masako and I to come over, me to come over to Netherlands. We jumped on an airplane and we came right over. Because, I said, look, Catherine just invited us over. So we came over. Because, Catherine's very serious. She's deadly serious. And that's the kind of people I must deal with. And so that's why I'm sitting in her studio right now. She's not even here. So, we just spent 2 weeks with her, though.
And she's working on a very important legal case. Are you helping her with that? And could you talk a little bit about that?
I can't because I don't know anything about it and I'm not actually helping her with it, right? Yeah. And if I were helping, I obviously would have to ask her permission anyway.
Yes,
so,
she has many, many irons in the fire, but there's a reason she and you are both, to me, the sort of colossus on the world stage. You both have an ability to pull up to the 30,000 overview and look down and say, this is how it all fits together. And so I think this is where we might go now into New Zealand. Before we do, you said something right at the beginning that I want you to explain. Why is the Netherlands so important in all of this? You said, I'm here in the Netherlands. It's a very important country to the geopolitics. Why?
Well, if I were going to take Europe, I would deindustrialize Germany, and for starters, and I would take Netherlands. I mean, and I would take Antwerp as well. Listen, Rotterdam Harbor is right down the road, and I mean that's the mouth of the Rhine River there. That's the Mississippi of Europe. If you want to control, the trade through here, that's obviously vital terrain. Likewise with Antwerp, the second largest port in Europe. So these are vital terrain. And one-stop shopping, this is where the globalist, WEF in particular, that sort of amalgam of people, is building the smart city called a tri-state city. Tri-state city because it's most of Netherlands, part of Belgium, and part of Germany, so tri-state. It's a huge smart city. They've been working on it for years. It's funny, often when I mention this in the past, when I would mention it on big shows, they would respond and say, that's conspiracy theory. And I'm like, actually, it's on your website. That's where I got it from, right? And and I'm all over here looking at it. You're clearly building it. And it's on your website. That's what gave me the idea, was reading your stuff. And then I came to look, and it's like, yep, you're really doing it. And so it's not conspiracy theory when they say it, and then I fly over and look, and it's legit. They're really doing it. Like the rewilding that's on the website, with the wolves and the bears and all that. Misako and I, we were just in Japan with a bear hunter we know, and we were eating bear with chopsticks like just weeks ago. You know what I mean? He's killed 50 bears this year, approximately 50, 50, right? Not 15, not 5, 50. And because the bears are going wild in Japan in the rewilding program, look up bear attacks in Japan. You're going to be astonished. They've got a lot of bears, and they've got two types of bears. They got this big giant brown bear up in Hokkaido, which is like totally serious bear. And then they've got a smaller black bear, the Asian black, down in Honshu, which is much smaller, but just as aggressive. They're both very serious, and they both kill people. And you look this year, like the bear hunter that we've known him for several years now, because we first reached out to him, I think in 2023 or so, because we just thought, the bears are going to end up being an issue. Back then, there was none in the newspapers, to our knowledge. So we found him several years ago because he was said to be the best bear hunter in that part of Japan. And you're sitting on a bearskin rug. He's got a whole stack of bear skulls, and his wife is serving us Japanese tea. It was really fun. He's a farmer. And he said he had first hunted bear when he was 4 years old on his grandfather's back. Anyway, so as these bears have gone really hog wild, they were going wild too, but as the bears have gone bear wild here in 2025, we reached back out to him, and we went up to see him just, I don't know, less than a month ago. And he told us he's killed 50 since April. He's killed about 500 in his life. Even while we were sitting with him eating bear, his phone, an app went off on his phone. He said, I just caught another one. Because he stalks some of them, and others he catches in traps. And if he catches it in a trap, it'll send him an alert. He said, here it is. Here you can see the picture. So anyway, and also one just got into a hotel. The police called him. He went to the hotel, went inside the hotel, and hit it with a shotgun with a slug, and it went through the bear and through the floor of the hotel. This is the kind of stuff that's happening a lot now in Japan. They're going to the schools and everything. This is rewilding. Similar here in Germany with the wolves.
Wow. Just for people who have what I call now toxic empathy. Oh, but that's wonderful. The animals are coming back in large numbers. Just for those people, just give a bit of a wake-up call about how this fits with the psychopaths who are trying to ruin the Western industries and the industrial countries, with the psychopaths who want to bring us all to our knees. Just give us that bigger picture. What is rewilding, and why does it fit in with Agenda 2030 effectively, Michael?
Well, the rewilding is using the animals actually as weapons to get us off the land, right? Like, for instance, if the wolves kill a sheep here in Netherlands and you kill the wolf, you can go to prison, right? And you will go to prison if they catch you. And likewise in Germany as well. And they always blame it on global warming. I read German, so I can read in the German press when they're talking about, well, now you can hit translate. But they, every time a wolf kills, Van der Leyen's pony or whatever, like actually happened, they always blame global warming. They always blame global warming, right? So they use and they're very clear that that's what they're using this for. Now, keep in mind, about maybe 10 years ago, I went to the Sundarbans in Bangladesh, right? In Bangladesh, the Sundarbans is the biggest mangrove swamp in the world. I think very few people have heard of it, but it's truly wild country. And the week before I got there, tigers had killed 6 people, right? So I was in Thailand at my office. I'm like, wow, those tigers are going nutters. So I flew over to Bangladesh, and I went down in there trying to see what's going on, right? And anyway, I went down there. I found a tiger footprint, actually. And you have to hire a forest ranger in Bangladesh when you go out there. So he had a rifle. And I said, is that rifle going to do any good? He goes, actually, my friend is a forest ranger. He was killed last year by a tiger. I said, did he have a rifle? He said, yes. You know, the tigers don't care about rifles. So what I'm getting to is, if you kill a tiger in Bangladesh, it's a death penalty. If you web search tiger attacks Bangladesh now, I think the police killed 6 poachers last week. I think it was just last week or so. They killed 6 poachers. They got into a firefight with poachers, according to the news, and killed 6. So, I mean, it's game on. You get out to Bangladesh, those tigers are unbelievable. And so is that part of rewilding, or is it just Call of the Wild? I don't know, but it's really dangerous. And then you see in Japan, it's becoming increasing. This one hotel that Misako and I stayed at, because it was close to where the bear hunter lives, they were coming on the loudspeakers to beware of bears. And they were, and the women walking around had bells and stuff. I mean, we were joking with them, like, you're just telling the bear where you're at. His bears don't care about those bells.
Here's breakfast. But actually, on a dark level, what you said there, I hadn't put it in those terms. They are actually weaponizing animals against humans. And the subtext to that, Michael, is humans are the scourge of the earth. So I'll give you an example. Jane Goodall used to be a hero of mine. I thought she was brilliant what she did.
She's a lefty.
Saving animals. She was out the gate. When she died, I went, well, that's one less crazy human on this planet.
Hardcore lefty.
Yeah, hardcore lefty. She spoke about humans as if we are a scourge, particularly in the West, as if we don't deserve a place on the earth. And this is really a fundamental ideology of these psychopathic globalists, is it not?
Absolutely. And that's why, keep in mind, I mentioned earlier, I studied cults quite a lot. That's very important. I first got on that line of study actually when I was a Green Beret, believe it or not. You might think all the Green Berets do nothing but learn how to blow stuff up or whatever, but it was actually a lot more than that. I went to language schools and that sort of thing. But that was when I first started to realize, I should study these cult things. What is a cult? You know what I mean? Some of the older soldiers mentioned that it's very useful to study religions and cults. Anyway, what I'm getting to is now...
Where did you go to study that?
India.
Did you
the particle accelerator of cults. When you in India, you can just take 2 religions or 2 cults and slam them together at the speed of light, and another one just spins right off, right? I mean, you can see it in real time. Wow. So, I spent a year tracking cannibals and that sort of thing in India and Nepal as well. I spent another year in Nepal. And so and then I lived with a cult in Northern California in Sonoma, right? So it took a while to get in with them, and I lived with them for a while. It was really interesting. I started to realize I was sleeping with one eye open, though. But I can tell you one thing: you start to realize the only cult that people never see is the cult that they're in, right? And when the more you learn about, just like with mathematics, every bit of mathematics study that you do, you will get returns for that, and likewise with the study of cult making and brainwashing. And let's say there's a great book that was written here in Netherlands, actually, by a Dutch psychologist in 1956, Joost Meerloo. How do they say it in Dutch? Joost Meerloo, Joost Meerloo, Merloo. It's called Rape of the Mind, 1956, Rape of the Mind. It's a very good book. I've read many, many books on cults and brainwashing. I like that one in particular. There are other great books. There are many. But that one in particular is good because he's really methodical in how he lays it out. So make sure if you read Rape of the Mind, 1956, juice Merlot, make sure you study it, like read it in quiet places and go for walks between chapters type stuff, because you need to absorb the lessons that you're learning. And you'll see as you read it, you'll find, hey, oh, I remember this. Oh, that's what they're doing there now, right? And keep in mind, brainwashing is a martial art. If Sun Tzu was here, or however you say his last name, if he even exists, but, if he were here, I can imagine sitting at the table with him and saying, the acme of brainwashing is to sense that you're being brainwashed and brainwash your brainwasher, right? Because you can. It's like in martial art, they're trying to put you in a headlock, reverse it, choke them out, right? You can do the same. And that's what I've been telling some of these people. Stop pretending we're not victims. When you sense that somebody's trying to brainwash you, study this art, reverse it on them, and pull them out of that crap, right? You can pull them out, right? Not to weaponize the brainwashing to hurt them, but to wake them up and pull them out. It's very important. It's not that you're always going to be able to do this in 10 minutes. Sometimes you won't even succeed, and you need to cut your losses and do it on somebody else that can wake up, right? Because there are methods to bring people out of this. Not everybody will. Don't get hung up on that. And actually, those who are hard to brainwash, I think I'm quite resilient against it, actually. Like when I was infiltrating the cannibals, many people said, "Are you afraid you'll become a cannibal?" I'm like, I tracked down Al Qaeda too. I'm not afraid I'll become Al Qaeda and start screaming Allahu Akbar. No.
What do you think makes that human different? I know exactly what you're saying, but what makes a human not vulnerable to this sort of brainwashing cult type behavior, do you think?
I don't know, actually, and there's been a lot of study on and talk about that since long before we were born. People were talking about the same thing. And actually, it depends on the topic. Like on some things I can be very resilient against, but I might be more vulnerable to other forms, right? It depends, right? So, but some things, for instance, people from the South, I'm from the South, I'm Scots-Irish heritage, right? That sort of person does not seem to be very vulnerable to joining a Hindu sect or something. But people from California, many of those just walk right into it effortlessly. In fact, they fly over there specifically to do it, right?
Yes.
With the explicit reason, I'm coming to find a guru type. They'll say it all the time.
I sometimes wonder if people whose lineage has been through tremendous trauma. For example, my father married late and he had me late because he was in World War II. And he did not believe in war in any way after that. He was totally disillusioned. I read the World War I poets and saw their disillusionment. It sort of taught me an intrinsic questioning of everything, of what I'm being told. But even there, he still believed in Churchill, Hitler, and we can have a whole debate about that another time, about whether history has written them up fairly, and there's great doubt about that now. So it's, you're right, at any point we can be pulled into it. The New Zealand so-called freedom movement became cultish. I stood politically last time in New Zealand and there were cries of, how dare you not be with everybody else over with this guy? Winston Peters, who I saw, was a cult and sucking people into his cult. So how do you define a cult? Is it where people unquestioningly follow and then when they see this person doing wrong, they don't go, that's wrong, you're out of line. You let me down. I won't follow you anymore. They keep following the wrongdoer. That's my sort of loose feeling about cult behavior, but what's yours?
Well, that is a fundamental question that people will argue about. How do you define art? You know what I mean?
Yeah. I want you to define God after this, okay?
Yeah, exactly. So we're gonna gerrymander a definition to make sure that I'm not in a cult. Yeah, but you are. You know what I mean? Exactly. so okay, let's just say your cult leader, I don't know, he dresses up funny and he wears a crown and he sits on a throne, that sort of stuff. Like the Pope, right? Right? And when I was with one cannibal that I tracked down from Houston, I tracked him down in India. His name was Gary Rayburn Stevenson. He came from a very wealthy family, right, in Houston. He was born on December 3rd, 1950. Gary Rayburn Stevenson, very smart guy. And at one point he said, Mike, he's a cannibal. And he'd say, Michael. He always said, Michael, don't you understand? Catholics are cannibals too. And I'm like, do tell. And he goes, well, think about it. The flesh and the blood of Christ or whatever, an effigy, he said. I was like, he would always come up with this stuff, and I'm like, well, actually, you're kind of making a point. I mean, I told that to all my Catholic friends. I've told them one by one. It's taken years.
I mean, perhaps the way to define it loosely would be to say, what are the actions of somebody who follows a cult? To me, that would be somebody who has lost the ability to question. Because I remember reading a definition years ago of true intelligence is where you are constantly curious, which is how you strike me, Michael, where you are. The mark of a really intelligent person is someone who, the more they learn, the more they realize there is to learn. Therefore, they're constantly humble and they're constantly curious, humble and curious. They're willing to question everything. So I guess if you're in the middle of something, to say, am I in a cult? Am I being brainwashed here? I suppose.
Is this a movie? Where's the zipper to this IMAX movie?
Exactly.
I'm getting out of here.
Well, let's, on that note, go to, and I'm sorry to call you this, New Zealand Defence Force, but you are being treated as if you are part of a cult now. The New Zealand Defence Force, and I've sent you these papers, a former soldier sent me this just the other day, saying that they are being trained in an imaginary exercise. It's an imaginary island that looks very like the South Island, and there's an imaginary group of terrorists who have all the hallmarks of traditional Christians. And I'm going to put up the information in a separate piece. I will read it out so that people can follow it. These documents are horrifying. They're basically, and when I ran it through Grok agreed, they're basically trying to propagandize our New Zealand military to look upon people with traditional Christian values in this country as tantamount to terrorists. I believe, Michael, this is an experiment that's being rolled out in New Zealand. And if they can sneak it in before Christmas and get away with it, and none of us howls with derision and horror, they will roll this out in your country or in Europe or in England. What was your feeling when you read those documents I sent you?
Right. Sorry, I don't have a glass, so I'm drinking straight from the bottle. So it's a little rude, but I was looking for a glass up here. Well, I read it, and keep in mind when I was in Special Forces, when you do these training exercises, and they will, they'll name they'll give names like that to the country, like Pineland. If you go through Green Beret training in North Carolina, they call the fictional country Pineland because there's a lot of pine trees there, and so you have so often when you're doing these exercises, they will actually give names like that. Americans are not the only ones that do it, Canadians and obviously Kiwis do it, right? And so that's a normal form of doing that, but they're clearly doing that to psychologically prepare their soldiers to go hunt down and kill Christians. It's very obvious. And many people have been warning about this for years, many. And so, I mean, it's a long list. Me as well. I mean, I'm just one of probably a million that have warned that they're going to use our armies to come after us. And that document right there is like it's a smoking gun. Of course, when you say that, they're going to say, oh, no, that's conspiracy theory. It's straight up. It's crystal clear. That was not ambiguous what they're up to. And likewise with the rewilding, it's not ambiguous at all. In fact, it's very clear that, sooner or later, it's going to go seriously kinetic. And actually, when you see the death jabs and whatnot, that is kinetic. I mean, they've killed huge numbers of people already with pharma, right? It's incredibly
with big
dangerous.
pharmaceutical products. With big pharmaceutical products. That's what you mean by pharma.
Prescribed by, literally, licensed doctors.
And when you say go kinetic, you mean we're talking war. We're talking a war on humanity, aren't we?
Right. Kinetic, when it comes, there's many types of warfare. The highest form of warfare is information war, and a subset of that is psychological operations. And that document was psychological operations on the soldiers and doing, actually, it sounds like actual war games training. But the, kinetic warfare is, guns hot, guns up, right? But also there's so many other forms of warfare, such as financial, food supply, psychological operations is the big one. There's endless forms of warfare. Everything can and will be weaponized, right? And museums, like Masako and I go to museums in dozens of countries. We've been in, probably a dozen in the last couple of weeks here in Netherlands. museums are highly weaponized, especially when you know what you're looking for. Then it becomes actually quite obvious.
What do you mean
And
by that, highly weaponized? What are you meaning?
for instance, if you go to the Maritime Museum in Amsterdam, so maybe some Dutch will watch this. If you're in Amsterdam, go to the Maritime Museum and look how that museum is completely anti-Dutch. And it's completely, and they, all this information in there, which should make Dutch people proud of Netherlands, actually is there to make other people actually hate you and for you to hate yourself. Right, and Masako and I, as we would, we go through so many museums. So at one point, she's like, "Notice they don't offer any evidence here at all for these claims that the Dutch did this, the Dutch did that." It's just, and it's always a one-sided story. We see this in museums all over the world. One time, I was giving a speech in Japan, and maybe, I don't know, 10 years ago. So I was giving a speech in Tokyo, and I said, I've been all over the world, and I ask a few questions in different countries. And I'll ask, do you trust your army? Do you trust your police? Do you trust your courts, right? Those are just stock questions that I ask everybody, right? And I also ask, what countries do you like? What countries do you not like? And I said, after having traveled, significantly around the world, I've only found 3 countries that hate Japan. Do you know what those are? And they're like, China. And I'm like, yep, they've got a huge information war going against you. And I've been to China a lot, looking at it actually. And
Who are
going
the other
to
2 countries who hate Japan? I can't imagine.
Well, that's
anyone.
the thing. This is the thing. So others said Korea, and I'm like, okay, but they don't really hate you, but North Korea. So they're like, well, anyway, they couldn't get the third one. Everybody's like, well, I don't know, North Korea, South Korea, China, who else? Nobody could figure it out. One country, the country that hates Japan the most, by far,
The Japanese.
is Japan. And I said that. I said that, and I don't know. I think this interview might be online with that video. That I don't know if they gave a standing ovation, but they were clapping very, very, very hard. I think they may have actually, and because I was like, "This is the same in Germany. It's the same in my country, the United States. If you're American, you should be incredibly proud of many of our accomplishments, and we've done some bad stuff. There is no question about it. But on the balance, we've actually been, certainly compared to most countries, been pretty good. We've done some really terrible things, but that doesn't mean that you should hate yourself. It means keep correcting these things. Don't let them happen. Throw elbows, throw knees when we're doing something bad and make it stop, right? But on the whole, you should not hate yourself. When you're made to hate yourself, now we started a program after World War II in Japan and Germany. In Japan, it's called the War Guilt Information Program, right? And the War Guilt Information Program is it was, well, to make Japanese hate themselves. We burned about 6,000 or 7,000 titles of their books. I don't know if we burned them, but we collected them and they disappeared. And so we actually did this to make them get away from that old. Anyway, I could go on for hours. I've written 3 books about it, and those books are not even in English. They're only targeted for Japanese audience to warn them about what's coming. China is clearly building an information war to go full bonkers on Japan. Like right now, they're lining up. China is lining up to go for Taiwan, obviously. And if you go for Taiwan, you're going to need to go for Okinawa, right? Okinawa is obviously Japan. And my wife's there tonight, right now. And so Okinawa.
Why are you saying they need to go to Okinawa? Is that for a base to be able to assault Taiwan? Is that what you're saying?
We have military there in the United States, but the reason you need to go for Okinawa, the reason they want to go for Taiwan as well, is because the island chains. Those island chains block. China is mostly a landlocked country, actually. A lot of people don't realize that. It's mostly landlocked, right? And so they want to have direct access to the Pacific, but there's something in the way. Taiwan and Okinawa, right? That island chain. A lot of people don't realize Japan is, I think, the only country that is actually north, south, east, and west of Korea. It's literally north. If you look on a globe, Japan is actually, Japan's quite spread out, right? Yes. And it's got, like Okinawa, the last island, it is very close to Taiwan, actually. But anyway, for even in 1879, President Grant, after he was President Grant, was off in Japan warning about they called it Luchu back then. Anyway, right now, Luchu, Okinawa, they also called it Ryukyu, right? Ryukyu, Luchu, that's what the same thing. Anyway, but he was warning about this in 1879. He was warning the Japanese and Chinese about fighting over Luchu. But anyway, let me get to this. The Chinese have been running an information program to persuade the people in Okinawa, the Okinawans who are full Japanese, to persuade them that they're Chinese, right? Now, what China is doing now with another information program, and these are very serious. These information, you must watch these major information wars. They're trying to persuade those on Okinawa that they're actually the Ryukyu kingdom, the kingdom of Ryukyu, who was an independent nation that Japan invaded and took, right? So China is lining the world. They got multiple target audiences, the Chinese information war. They got their own people, the Chinese, so they need to create hatred among them to go after Japanese, right? And us. They're creating hatred against us too. And they need to create hatred from the Japanese toward Japanese, and then they want the Japanese to just lay down and act like nothing's happening. They want the Japanese weak, and the information war also targets Americans for the same reasons. But there's also a global audience, actually 4 audiences. That the Chinese want the globe to think that Ryukyu, kingdom of Ryukyu, was a separate nation that Japan took, and we're going to liberate it. China, meaning China, is going to liberate the kingdom of Ryukyu, because they want that island chain, right? This is very serious. Now, keep in mind, information war is absolutely intense, and information war is so effective that as an example, if I say, how long was Taiwan part of China? Every historian I talked with, there are fewer than 1% that actually give an accurate answer. And how long was Taiwan part of China? The actual answer, the truthful answer, is 0 days. 0. Taiwan was never, ever, not for 1 day, part of China. Not even 1 hour. But everybody knows that it was. They know that it was because of information war. I've actually told historians, I'm like, you've made the claim, and then they'll often say in front of a lot of people, oh, well, you're not, you don't know, blah, 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 you don't speak Mandarin, and yada, 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 yada. And they'll start to throw their PhDs around, and I'm like, all right, ceasefire, lock and clear. I bet you $10,000. Cable, silence. I'm betting him $10,000. I will put it in a bank in 15 minutes. We'll put it in escrow. Put your 10,000 in.
Put it in silver at the moment, Michael.
You've got put it in silver. I'll give you 3 months, 6 months. Present your evidence, and we'll have this jury convene online, and we will see your evidence. And I'll be happy to take that $10,000 now or later. I'm putting you on notice. It's a bet. Once you do that, once you're like, oh, let's get serious. Let's go guns up on this. You're making these claims. I'm betting you money in front of the table. You can't do it. And nobody's been able to claim it because it never was. It never was. There's historians out there right now going, I'm going to make me $10,000. Yeah. And then they're researching it, and then they go, shoot.
I mean, the most one could claim is that the inhabitants of Taiwan were once part of China, because many conservative people who did not go along with Mao Zedong then went to Taiwan and set up this extraordinary industrialized country of hugely efficient production capacity and the ability, this little island, to withstand, as you say, their propaganda, their threats, their growing dominance. Taiwan has been an extraordinary country. For people who aren't aware of that, just tell people the strategic importance of Taiwan. As you said, it's stopping the flood of China down into the Pacific. Although I will say this, China has invaded the Pacific Islands. It's given debt a little bit like the IMF, came here in 1966 to Keith Holyoake, our then Prime Minister, and opened up a bag of money and said, we'll give you all this money. And from there, we've gone into increasing levels of darkness in New Zealand because our foolish politicians took this easy money and basically put us in debt. And that's what's been happening to China in the Pacific Islands. So there's been another form of invasion, certainly, but they can't quite flood everything without getting Taiwan, can they?
No, they have to take it. Now, keep in mind, Chinese move all over the place. They're slowly taking Panama as an example. And Panama was never part of China either. And if you see, there's also an information war that China is putting. Most Americans probably don't see it, and I doubt Kiwis and Aussies see it, but they're also making an information war that China is responsible for much of the infrastructure that was built in the United States, right? And that they discovered the United States, or America, let's say. And so, I mean, they're doing it. Keep in mind, they're doing this with their people so that their people are ready to go ahead and take it. Now, imagine if the New Zealand military, they start playing out these war games, which they fully intend to do, in my estimation. I think they fully intend to do it, right? Even if the ones that made the original document may not fully intend to do it, an information war, it will grow into the system, right? And it will become part of the psychology. Now, imagine how this can play out for the people that are actually, getting this in the manual and whatnot. How it can play out. They start killing the Christians and the white people in New Zealand, and which they can easily do, right? Now, China or whoever else can then come in here and go, we have to liberate them, like Ryukyu, like, Luchu, right, Ryukyu Kingdom, right? We will liberate you, right? And you'll be like, oh, we need help. We'll take anybody, And the next thing you know, there you go. You've got China in there, right? Or whomever. It could be somebody else. That's how this stuff really goes. This is a big game. This is you got to look at this strategically, right? It's not, that this isn't just a few crazy people doing this in the manual. This is a part of a much larger play. And this is normal stuff. You look at, for instance, this is absolutely normal to do stuff like this. There's nothing new about it. You look at, let's say, Mauritius right now, or let's look at Diego Garcia. Diego Garcia is a military base that we have out in the Indian Ocean, strategic, right? And China is using the United Nations. So you see, there's your surrogate there. They're using the United Nations to try to take Diego Garcia from the United Kingdom and give Diego Garcia to Mauritius, right? And so then China will take it from Mauritius. They'll take Mauritius too, right? So you see how this goes. Just like China, this is normal. There's nothing new about this. It's not conspiracy theory. It's an old form of warfare that I started learning about when I was a young soldier going through Green Beret training when I was 19, 20, 21, 22, 23. We were learning this stuff. It's like that's what you do, right? Is things like this.
You must have been exceptional, though, because not many soldiers or police seem to question it. They just take what they're told to do, and then they do it for their overlords. But you must have been going, but why? But why? How does this fit? Were you quite rare within the armed forces to be asking those questions, Michael? Then?
Oh, some of the older soldiers were questioning it more than I was. Because back then I didn't realize how evil this could get. I always thought the other guys were doing evil, right? So when I was very young,
the other cult was bad, but my cult's okay.
Yeah, we're the good guys, right?
Yeah.
De oppresso libere, special forces, free the oppressed. And I was totally like, there I am. So keep in mind, the two A teams I was on, I can say this now, it was obviously top secret at the time. Our mission was to parachute into Poland and fight Soviets. We were to parachute in at low level and near Białystok and do all kinds of things and cause problems for the Soviets. So I trained for 3 hard years to do that, right? It was a huge amount of training. And but we never did it, obviously. If we did, Europe would look very different now. And because that would have been World War III.
Who stopped that? Do you know who stopped that plan?
Well, that was contingency planning just in case. Well, the Soviet Union fell apart.
Yeah.
When the Soviet Union fell apart, then that mission was, and it's been so many years now that it's outside the legal framework. It's okay to talk about it, but and then I lived in Poland after I was out of the army. It was quite interesting. But what I'm getting to is stuff like this is normal, right? It's only abnormal to people that don't do anything about it. Just like, to a doctor, gangrene is normal. You see it all the time, right? Especially one that does a lot of war. But for the average person, they'll probably never see it in their life, right? But this form of warfare, if that's what you do or that's what you study, you'll see it's all over the world. It's all over the world all the time. It's happening in our own countries. It's happening in New Zealand right now. It's happening across the United States and Canada and here in Netherlands. That's why I'm here in Netherlands, right? You got Amsterdam is over 50% migrants now, right? More than 50%, right? And yet this morning I was having coffee before the Afghan picked me up that I had hired to drive around for a couple of hours and come to Catherine's studio. I was having coffee with a Dutch man this morning, and we were talking about these things, and he couldn't even see that they had been invaded. I'm like, walk down this street. I mean, just like, look who just served me coffee. I mean, it's the whole, I mean, more than 50% of Amsterdam is our new Dutch, or whatever you want to call them. I mean, they are your replacements. He's like, what evidence is this? I'm like,
it's around you. It's all around you.
I don't even know what to say. I mean, walk down the, and we talked about intoxicants, and he was all about, it's about freedom. I'm like, no, it's a war. The way we killed the Indians in the United States and subjugated them was mostly whiskey. Rifles were important, but they weren't the big weapon. The B-52 bombers, which didn't exist back then, were cases of whiskey, right? And then we would use the whiskey like, hey, I'll give you a case of whiskey, but now you owe me 200 beaver pelts. And then, hey, you're still behind on beaver pelts. Next thing you know, you got them signing agreements, taking land, taking timber. I've studied this stuff for years. You should see Masako in my library in Japan. It's got a substantial section on this. It's quite. Yeah. We spend late nights going through things like this and go, wow, here it was in Bulgaria, here it was in North Carolina, same thing in Israel, same thing over here, right? These things that you see in Israel, it takes on a magical tone because of the magical elves of Israel, right? So we're supposed to all worship magical elves of Israel. But in reality, Israel was formed because of the Suez Canal, right? Let's go to the 1890s. In the 1890s in the United States, we were getting a lot of Indians on reservations, and we were offering land for something called the Dawes Rolls. And I'm going to go to Israel. I'm combining these two stories because they happen at the same time, and they're the same story in different places.
I've never heard of the Dawes Rolls. Dawes Rolls, I've never heard that.
The Dawes Act actually was in 1887, I believe, and it was an act that would give Indians, the 5 civilized tribes, Cherokee, Choctaw, Chickasaw, Creek, and Seminole. Those were the 5 civilized tribes. Actually, the 1890 census, which I have the original actually, it's of the taxed and untaxed Indians. It's a fascinating census. It's like weighs like 20 kilos. It's one of those giant books. You'll break your foot with it. I mean, it's unbelievable. It's very detailed, right? And not 20 kilos, probably 10, like 20 pounds. But I mean, it's very detailed. It's very big. Yep. And taxed and untaxed Indians. Anytime a census is being done of you, that ain't for your well-being. And so what happened was, it took a while. We did the Dawes Act in 1887, I think. Then comes the 1890 census, and we're setting up for this. And then comes, if you're living on one of these reservations, like Cherokee Reservation, and you can prove that you're living there and you plan to stay there, you can get 160 acres of land, right? You can get land. So suddenly, Scots-Irish people like me, my heritage is Scot-Irish, that's my culture, is... But because before the Dawes Act and the Dawes Roll is a census. The Dawes Roll, if your name is in the Dawes Rolls,
I see.
Then you can get the land, right? You had the pipe rolls in England. The pipe rolls were in the 1100s, yes. Right? It's hard to get that original of that one. But that pipe roll, it was like the pipe rolls, but it was the Dawes Rolls, right? And so the Dawes Rolls, I have the original of that as well. So I looked up our name because it's not in there. And so, because, Scots-Irish, there'll be Scots-Irish watching this, yes, who will say, yes, I'm part Cherokee, or I'm part Choctaw, or Chickasaw. Usually they'll say Cherokee. Some will say Choctaw or Chickasaw, usually Cherokee, right? Like I was told that I'm part Cherokee when I was young, right? And so, and now as I got older and learned how to research, I'm like, no, I'm not part Indian, unfortunately. But anyway, the reason suddenly that Scots-Irish wanted to, I was like, maybe that's why I love to go out in the forest all the time and splash around in the swamps. I'm part Indian. I love going in the jungles with the Indians. But
we're probably part of everything. We're all probably part of everything.
Yeah, we're Heinz 57, and so certainly culturally. So when you could get the land, a lot of Scots-Irish who were really mixed in with the Cherokee and whatnot for various reasons that had to do with demographic warfare, actually, they suddenly were going, yeah, I'm part Cherokee. I'll wear the feathers. I can get 160 acres of land. I actually have an original letter from the Department of Indian Affairs and I found it on eBay. It was an original letter. It was from about 1910 maybe, and it was to a lady. It was addressed, I don't know, whatever her name was, like Miss Smith or whatever, in some city. I think it was in Alabama. It didn't have any address. It was just her name in the city. Anyway, the letter was telling her that they searched the Dawes rolls and her name's not on it. And so she was clearly applying to get Cherokee land, or Cherokee, because it was for Cherokee Nation, and her name was not on it. And so they're like, you can't dispute this with us. You have to dispute it with the department or whatever. Anyway, so what I'm getting to, that's the 1880s, 1890s, early 1900s. That's when Israel was formed. Theodor Herzl, through the same mechanism, exact same parallel mechanism. Theodor Herzl does his book on Zionism. He's an atheist, right? He was the number one guy. He was, so in 1896, I think his book came out, right? I've got an original of that as well. And so his book is talking about, might have been 1897. Anyway, his book is about, we're going to make Israel type. I'm fast forwarding a bit, right? For the serious historians to go, oh, you're gliding over a lot. I am, because we don't have much time. But so anyway, the British were involved.
And it was linked to the Suez Canal, right?
Suez Canal opened in 1869. Suez Canal opened in 1869. The British Empire was the biggest empire in the world. The pound was the global currency at the time. It used to be the guilder, the Dutch guilder. Then it switched to the pound, and then the dollar later. But at that time, it was the British Empire was king, right? Yes. And now there were English specifically that were warning, if that canal is opened, they were worried about it. That will become our spinal cord. So they called it the spinal cord of the British Empire. So and some of the English were like, if we allow that canal to open, then what's going to happen is Egypt is going to take it and we're going to get in a war with France. Well, Egypt definitely took it. So they were right on that. Didn't end up in a war with France on that, but actually did end up with war, including France. Anyway, not to go into that. But the bottom line is, so then they want to control. Remember, these wars are about three major things: routes, resources, and mythology, right? Routes, resources, and mythology, right? That's what the wars are about, right? You have to understand those things. Major route, number one route in the world at that time in 1869, Suez Canal, right? And so if you can let other ships go through and yet not the British, that would be a very serious thing, right? Now keep in mind, I just had dinner the other night with a Dutch man in the shipping industry, and his ships are not allowed to go through the Suez Canal right now. They're going all the way around Africa, right? Because of the Houthis shooting missiles and whatnot. So, I mean, This is quite significant, right? But Chinese ships are allowed to go through, right? So routes, resources, and mythology. So in 1869... What do you
mean by mythology? Explain that third category.
For instance, people fighting for religion, or that, generally religion,
or ideology.
Like religious ideology and mythology, right? So, I mean, we can, anyway, let's say ideology. And so, routes, resources, and ideology, right? And so, anyway, 1869, it opens. Panama Canal is not open yet, opens in 1914. But so the British are like, man, this is a big deal. I mean, it's great for us. We can make more money while we're free to go through there. But sooner or later, somebody's going to cut us off, and they're going to, whoever controls that, the Russians or whoever it's going to be, then they can use it, and we won't be able to use it. That's when Theodor Herzl was used as a puppet to go, we need a homeland for the Jewish people. Now, keep in mind, a lot of the Jews are like, why would we go there? I mean, seriously. I mean, the real Jews. I'm talking about the authentic Jews, right? The authentic Jews were like, why would, like the authentic Cherokee, it'd be like putting the authentic Cherokee over in that area. And they're like, well, we should go to North Carolina, right?
So they were really a diaspora. They were scattered all over. They were... They were integrated in societies everywhere. Would you say that?
The Jews were all over the world. But so a lot of the authentic Jews were like, actually, I live where I live. I don't want to move out of Berlin, right? A lot of them didn't want to leave Germany. They were Germans, right? They were in the German army. They were straight up hardcore Germans, right? They were Jewish Nazis, right? I mean, it's pretty strange, and Zionists as well. Zionists and Jews are different, right? But anyway, there were Jews that are like, why don't we do it in Argentina or somewhere else? I mean, if we're going to make a Jewish homeland, why don't we do it in a place where we can live in peace and raise our families and make money and be Jewish alone without a war. But
And there are
that's
some
not what.
theories that Ukraine was a base and will be again, well, certainly for Ashkenazi Jews. Is that correct, according to your
I think there's
research?
basis to that, clear
Yeah.
basis. Now, this is where it gets to be interesting. The reason I told the stories of the Scots-Irish, and so many Scots-Irish still think they're part Cherokee, and most have zero evidence. That's why the Cherokee Indians up in North Carolina, they track their heritage like the Mormons do in Salt Lake City. I mean, because they look through the Dawes rolls, because there's always people going, I'm part Cherokee, I want part of that casino, right? And
Yes.
it's not the 160 acres anymore, but
We have it in New Zealand with Maori. There's a guy, Willie Jackson, one of our more corrupt
right.
political leaders, and he's one of those corporate Maori, I call them, corporate indigenous people who don't ever care about the real Maori, but they just amass a lot of money for themselves, and they're very, very greedy. When you look at his lineage, there's practically no Maori in him. There's a whole lot of Scots
That's
Irish.
normal.
It's just such a con, and they self-appoint as we're the leaders of Maori because they can exploit and take. And
All right.
yeah,
There's American Indians that look like you, blonde hair, blue eyes, and clearly not an Indian. And
who
but
was that dreadful Democrat that Trump had a name for, an Indian name for?
yeah,
Was
Pocahontas.
Elizabeth Warren?
Elizabeth
Pocahontas.
Warren,
Oh,
yeah.
she's dreadful.
Pocahontas, yeah. Oh, and she was like 1,028th or something like that. Yeah. So she had like a molecule of Indian fly through. But
But
anyway,
she had a lot of molecules of greed in her, Michael. A lot.
oh yeah, and so that's how she helped get herself into school
Yeah.
or law school. But what I'm getting to is it's that same mechanism that had Scots-Irish. Me growing up thinking I'm part Cherokee, like practically every Scots-Irish ever born. I'm part Indian, and then when you really try to figure it out, I'm like, turns out I'm not. Too bad. I wasn't even trying to get any land. I just thought it was cool to be part Indian. And I was disappointed, and so I'm still disappointed. But but likewise, so many Europeans, like the Maliakovskis, would move to places like Israel, and they would take different names, like Netanyahu, because Netanyahu's name was Maliakovsky from Poland, right?
From Poland,
And
yes.
there's another Maliakovsky down in Argentina. His name is Mele, right? Same name, Maliakovsky. They're both Maliakovskys, right? So I mean, now keep in mind. So many of the so-called Jews, and if they're talking about anti-Semites, and yet they're like blonde hair, blue eyes, like they're like all about bombing Gaza. That's where the real Semites are, the real Semites. But you got to keep in mind with information war, they try to conflate these terms and confuse Zionism with Judaism and Semitism with Judaism, and then as a weapon, right? And a confusion weapon, and a confusion. Listen, Zionists killed a lot of Jews in World War II, and Jews killed a lot of Zionists. I mean, you should come see my library in Japan. There's all about, from the time frame, there's all kinds of books about this from the time frame, right? Ben Gurion, the Ben Gurion airport there in Tel Aviv that I've flown into, that guy was ready to kill half the Jews to make Israel. He didn't care. He was feeding them to Nazis, and he was feeding them and he wanted to make Israel, right? And so, but remember, Israel was not made for Jews. It was made using Jews, just like other places are made using other cultures. And it was made, the Zionists used the Jews to make Israel because of routes and resources. So they used ideology as the energy for the routes and resources. Now you've got the energy off of Gaza, of course, that Israel just signed an agreement with Egypt for, I don't know, $37 billion I read. I don't know what, and then the Ben Gurion Canal, which may end up being built, I don't know, the Indo-European corridor. And also, if you look at Israel, even if there were no Suez Canal, that's strategic land, just like Panama. Even if there were no Panama Canal, Panama would be a place you would definitely want to own. If you're a big player, you want to own Panama. But the canal did open in 1914. I tell the Panamanian government, I've been with the government a lot down there. You're a lamb with a bunch of pork chops around your neck, and you're surrounded by tigers, right? And somebody's going to get that. You better really make thoughtful decisions about how you proceed. From here with what's going on with Trump and China and whatnot. You better really think it through who you want to be with, because somebody's going to take this place. And right now, they're clearly setting up to take Panama. The Chinese are, right? There's no question about it. I'm there all the time. And so it's routes and resources. If you live atop of a giant gold mine, actually there's great gold in Panama too, by the way, but if you live atop, so not gold, but I'm saying that metaphorically, and also there's a huge amount of copper there, which is very important, by the way. But if you live atop something as important as Panama, Panama is so incredibly important to world trade. You better be a very smart person, and because you don't have a lot of strategic depth, you don't have a military, you don't have any way to really defend yourself except through alliances, right? That's why the king of Hawaii, in the old Hawaiian flag, he had all these mixture of different flags on it, like the Russian and American and the British and all that, because he was trying to cut it with everybody. Like, hey, we're friends with everybody. Because you got to keep in mind, Hawaii, again, was a lamb in the middle of the Pacific, and it was surrounded by sharks. And eventually, America got it. Lucky for Hawaii, actually, because otherwise it could have been the Russians or somebody else, right? Somebody was going to take it. That's just the way this goes, right? Panama is the same way. Somebody's going to take it. And so Panama needs to be very wise in their decisions. I know I'll share that. I'll send this link to Panamanian government people that they better be very wise on how they are very smart people, and they're having difficulty in how to manage this because the United States ignores them, and except when it comes to insult them, right? The Panamanians clearly want to be on our side, but they keep getting dismissed, right? That happened with North Vietnam. Let's say Vietnam, when North Vietnam wanted to be, Ho Chi Minh wanted to adopt the U.S. Constitution.
Yes, he
did.
He
wanted to be on the American side. The Japanese, prior to World War II, before finally attacking Pearl Harbor, very openly wanted to be on our side, very desperately wanted to be on our side. And that was not our strategic plan. Our strategic plan was War Plan Orange. Our strategic plan was to take out Japan, to use it to control China. Remember, that island chain also can help you. It's a door that swings both ways, right? So when we took Japan, we then had more influence over China, and then we built China's economy up and destroyed our own, right? That's what the Spanish did and the Portuguese did. When the Spanish and the Portuguese ruled the world, back centuries ago, they made a lot of gold and silver because that was a plunder operations between mostly with Spain and Portugal, whereas Netherlands, they went around and grew stuff, and the British did some plundering, but they mostly were doing trade, right? But the plunder ways of the Spaniards and the Portuguese, they had a lot of gold and silver. Then they used places. This where I'm at right now used to be controlled by Spain. Actually, exactly where I'm standing. There was a Spanish fort nearby. But the point is that the Spaniards started hiring the Dutch and English to make their ships. Hello, it's like the United States getting our electronic components from China. Or it's like and so when Spain would go to war with the Dutch or with the English, think about it. Every ship that we sink of theirs, or I wasn't Dutch or English, but I'm in Netherlands now, but every ship of theirs that was sank, they just couldn't replace them, right? And meanwhile, the Dutch would be, they were pouring the ships out, right?
It's so fascinating. I mean, you talk about people like Ho Chi Minh was not wanting to be an enemy of America. I was reading the other day that Hitler really did not want to invade England. That whole thing was also, I mean, this is the place where we stop, Michael, and say to people, it is written by the victors' history. And so you must question everything you read as official history, must you not? It's never settled, I think, any more than science should ever be settled. We must constantly be willing to question what we've been taught about our history, should we not?
We have to, and that's why in Masako, in my library in Japan, it's actually a war library, but Masako at one point said, in our home, you could never tell that I had ever been in a war anywhere looking around. There's no actual books on guns. There's no pictures of war. Even though I took some of the most famous photos of Afghan and Iraq wars, both of them, right? There's no indication, despite that's what we do 7 days a week is study war, right? There's no books on submarines or aircraft carriers or that sort of thing. It's all about economic war, psychological operations, demographic war, anthropological warfare. It's about intoxicants. It's about gold and silver and mining. It's about agriculture. It's about the other psychological operations. It's these other 99% of war that happens all the time. The kinetics are very important when you're in the kinetics. I mean, it's life and death, obviously. But most of warfare takes place right now. We're talking in microphones, right? It's information war. We're actually doing information war right now. We're actually in combat right now, right?
Is that why it feels so intense to so many people? I had a dear friend write to me yesterday, and when will this nightmare end? And you're saying, actually, it's always been going on in the background. But when we were younger, Michael, well, when you were young in the forces, you really did go in with an idealism. You admitted that earlier. I was very
definitely
idealistic about, this is a good world and we can make it better. And then over these last 5 years in particular, so many of us have awoken and gone, this world is utterly corrupt. There seems to be a group of people behind the curtain who are pulling strings. Before I move to that, I want to just go back to something you said earlier, which was very, yeah.
Wizard of Oz, Man Behind the Curtain. Sorry.
That movie. Everybody watched Wizard of Oz over Christmas.
Remember, Wizard of Oz is Wizard of Ounces. It's about gold and silver. Originally in the book, her slippers are not ruby, they're silver. And the yellow brick road is gold.
It's gold.
And they fall asleep in the opium and the poppies. That's Papaver somniferum. That's opium poppy, right? So they fall asleep because that's opium. That is a very, very intelligently written book. But you have to realize that's about gold and silver, bimetallic monetary system. That's about information war. That's about the man behind the curtain. That's about drugs. They've actually got the poppy that they fall asleep. Anyway, I interrupted you. You said the man behind the curtain.
Well, yeah, the man behind the curtain. I want to go to that. But before that, I just want to pick up on something you said earlier, which I didn't want to cut in on. You said Zionists and Jews are very different. And I really want to sheet home what that difference is to people watching this. How do you term those differences?
Right. Some of the people I work most closely with are devout Jews, like serious Jews and like hardcore Jews. Right? And they hate Zionists. They hate Zionists. Yeah. And so I mean,
let's put that right here. Nobody who knows really good Jewish people is anti-Semitic because you criticize Benjamin Netanyahu and Zionism and what Israel is doing in Gaza or anywhere else in the world, Charlie Kirk or any of it, because there are really genuine, devout, good people who are Jewish who also dislike and want to get rid of.
That I work with very closely and have for years, right? We're battle buddies, right? And so I mean, straight up. And so but keep in mind, anti-Semitic is also information war. Because, like Benjamin Netanyahu is as white as we are, right? That guy's not Semitic. Semitics are the guys that those guys are bombing. That's, my taxi driver today, right? He's an Afghan. He's a Pashtun guy. I asked him, because I was in Afghanistan for 2 years. And a lot of Pashtun think that they're a lost tribe of Israel, right? And he actually thinks that too, right? So a lot of Kurds think they're a lost tribe of Israel. A lot of Kurds are actually Zionists. I spent a lot of time with Kurds. I get along great with Kurds. There's a lot of Kurds in Japan now, actually. But a lot of Kurds also think they're a lost tribe of Israel. And so you'll see a lot of Kurds, they love Israel. Not all of them, but many of them, they're totally bought into it, right? And as are some Pashtun. Some Pashtun don't like Israel, but they're like, yeah, we came from Jews, but now we're Muslims, right? And so, but they do, some Pashtuns will tell you that they did come from, that's what I'm getting to. So what's a Jew and all this? I don't know, man, it gets complicated. And I'm not sure if anybody truly knows because it fades to gray. But when it comes to Zionism, the Zionism that we're talking about was designed as a weapon to get control of routes and resources, right? It was designed as a weapon, and it used Jews, and it uses Christians. The bulk of Zionists on the pie chart are American evangelicals, right? Of which many are my friends, right? And so we argue about this, although some see through it. Actually, some do actually see through it. It's not like all evangelicals are totally down with doing genocide in Gaza. They're not. Some are, some are not, right? And those who are, we argue pretty vehemently. But those who are not, I mean, they see through. The Zionist Christians are basically on the bottom deck of the boat, rowing the boat for the Zionists that are on the top of the boat
Yes.
in the sunshine. And that's the bulk. Keep in mind, when it came time to create this Zionist structure to control the Suez and other things, it grew and it grew and it grew and it grew, and it always hides behind Jews. Now, many Jews are Zionists, and many Jews support Zionists, but many Jews absolutely hate Zionists. And if you'll have no problems finding primary source documentation of Jews and Zionists killing each other in Germany. They kill each other like crazy, right? And there's Jews killing Jews as well, and Zionists killing Zionists, and Zionists killing Jews. And they kill each other like crazy. Yeah. So it's a great mishmash.
Zionism feels like some kind of parasite that's latched on to the Jewish people and the purity of what the Jewish people really are. A good way to look at it for me
would be... It's a parasitoid. Yeah. A parasitoid kills the host.
Yes. Yes. Well, a good way to look at it would be, say, Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning, which I think everybody should read. It's the most humane book, but he is talking about being in the death camps, this young doctor. He finds succor in, being out in the snow, building a train track, and he's so sick and so starved that he gets thrown onto a wooden bench among other dying and dead bodies. Right. And he's lying in there going, how lucky am I? I'm having a day off. I'm in between warm bodies. This is the resilience of this man. But he talks a lot in that book about the capos. And they were the people in World War II in the camps who actually were of Jewish origin, who had been imprisoned there because of that. And they would, for an extra crust of bread, they would whip their own people, or they would report on their own people to the Germans. They were traitors. And to me, that feels like the lineage of Zionism, because it's so dark. So I want to go from there to behind the curtain. Who's the man? It's not a man behind the curtain. There seem to be a number of groups. We've got Zionist ideals for empire. We've got Chinese ideals to build empire. We've got the Islamists who seem to want to build empire. We've got Big Pharma that wants to control our bodies and obviously have patients for life. And they are an enormous multi-trillion-dollar force in the world now. Are these all coming together? Behind them, is it the Rothschilds and Rockefellers and other families whose names we don't know, who are using these forces that are wanting to control the world for their means? But who's behind the curtain, Michael, in your view?
It's clearly an organizational structure of structures, right?
Yes.
Which transcend any individual. Like I've seen so many Americans blame everything that went wrong on Obama. I'm like, Obama was just one piece of fruit on one tree in a giant orchard of this stuff, right?
A very rotten tree and a very rotten piece of fruit, but only one.
Right. And just like Biden was just one other fruit, and Bush or whatever, Trump, of course. These are they're fruit that falls off and disappears, and then another replaces it. But it's the organizational structure, right? The organizational structure, as one very brilliant retired general who's now passed away told me. He said, organizational dictates outcome. Colonel Johnson. And he told me that, and he's like, organizational. When he told me that, I'm like, wait, what'd you say? Organizational structure dictates outcome. It was brilliant, right? And so I wrote it down. So I've said it so many times since then. But you'll see the organizational structure. Like, for instance, let's say Border Patrol. Like, I've been across the entire U.S. southern border from San Diego to SpaceX. It took many months, right? I was a lot on the Mexican side as well. So I was out with Border Patrol a lot. And the Border Patrol, they're part of an organizational structure, which is part of another organizational structure. It's part of this other structure, right? But they're basically, each Border Patrol agent is a gear. And that gear does what the gear is supposed to do. You're plugged into this little thing, and you just click like this, and you'll get paid. And they don't need... So let's say they're on a clock. They don't even know they're on a clock. And if they did, they don't know what time it is. I mean, there are some Border Patrol that do know what's going on, but I've found, after having seen Border Patrol across the entire southern border, I would say fewer than, I don't know, certainly fewer than 5% have any idea what's going on. Probably more like 2 or 3. The ones who do really do. They really study a lot. The ones who do study, they're on it. Those are a joy to talk with. But what I'm getting to is, when I would say, who's the one that's bringing all these people to our country? And they would usually say Mexican cartels. But the Border Patrol were the ones loading them up, and the National Guard and whatnot, and the Texas DPS, it's Department of Public Safety, like Texas sort of FBI, I guess. They would be loading them up on the buses, and I would see them doing it, right? I mean, I saw them load thousands of invaders on the buses, and I would ask, you said the Mexican cartels are the ones doing this, but you're the one loading them on the buses. Are you with the Mexican cartels? And they're like, they would say usually, literally, like right out of the book, I'm just doing my job. I got to, what am I going to, that just literally right out of the book, right out of the movies, right? Like a Hong Kong policeman told me that on a video that went viral during a riot in Hong Kong. But he said the same thing, I'm just doing my job. And he was actually a British policeman in the Hong Kong police force, right? Or a British subject, not a
Michael,
British
what
policeman.
do you say to someone who gives that trite, shallow answer and is not thinking about their own betrayal of their own children and their own grandchildren? What do you say to them when they go, oh,
I
this
tell
is my
them,
job?
I tell them, yeah, I know, I know I'm putting you on the spot right now, but go home and think about what's happening.
Yes.
Just go home and think about it, and think it through. Go for a walk and think about what's happening here, because the Mexican cartels did not pick those people up from Bangladesh and move them to Ecuador and put them through the Darien Gap and bring them all the way up through Nicaragua and Honduras and Guatemala and all that stuff up through Mexico, and then you put them on the bus, right? That was not the Mexican cartels, right? Our government is doing this 100%, not ambiguous. United Nations is doing this, and our government, United States government, is the biggest funder. They're not the only one. So is the Japanese government. So is the EU. Canada is a huge funder of the United Nations, right? So our governments are actually doing this. Alex Mayorkas, he was the Department of Homeland Security chief. He came down to the Darien Gap in Panama. I waited for 4 days. Landed right in front of me in 4 Black Hawk helicopters. I was there when he came, bringing more money, right? Yeah. And so he used to be, this is Mayorkas, at this time was the Department of Homeland Security when he came down to Panama to increase the flows to the United States of the invasion. He used to be the highest board member, highest of the Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society. The Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society, highest, if you go to highest.org, HIAS.org, and look up, there's a letter in there congratulating him from leaving HIAS and going over to Department of Homeland Security. Now, he was an immigrant from Sephardic Jewish parents who came from Cuba to the United States. And then he grew up, he became a board member on HIAS. He's a clear capo, and then started invading the United States, right? Now, he's part of the government. He's top-level government, right? Now, Trump hasn't done anything about it. He's not doing mass deportations. He's giving visas out, right? Has he closed the border? Somewhat closed, yes, but is he doing mass deportations? Absolutely not. He's not. And the United Nations and all those people are still intact, because I go look at them. I was just in Schiphol Airport 4 or 5 days ago. If you're in Amsterdam, go to Schiphol Airport, go to Terminal 3, go through the rotunda doors, look to the left, you'll see an IOM ticket counter. I go there every time I go through Schiphol, and I go see, are they still open? So I was just there just 4 or 5 days ago, and the IOM, the International Organization for Migration, they were helping somebody go to an airplane. They give the tickets. Those are the same ones that operate the operations in Panama. They operate them in Philippines. They operate them in Japan. They operate them here in Netherlands, obviously, because they're in Schiphol Airport. I mean, that's the wing of the United Nations. That's the main engine room of this. Then you have people like HIAS and Catholic Charities, Lutheran Services, Doctors Without Morals, all these people, right?
Yes.
There's hundreds of organizations that do this, more than 60 in Panama.
But
So
it's in lockstep, Michael. I mean, in New Zealand, we have a token globalist puppet politician, prime minister. He's called, but he's obviously been placed there by the globalists, Christopher Luxon. He spends more time bringing in Indian people and praising India and saying, let's just flood New Zealand with Indians, make it really easy for them to come. We've just had a story of an Indian local election that was totally corrupted. They all set each other up, and that has been exposed. But we know that, for example, Indian qualifications are being allowed in Australia and New Zealand, and they are not even worth the paper they're written on, and there's no checkup on it. So again, we've got this globalist lockstep here in the antipodes of mass migration from countries where the standards are really low and these local traitor governments are selling out their own people. For people who can't bear that, who can't get beyond that, but he wouldn't sell us out. He's a white New Zealander. He had all the benefits of growing up in New Zealand. He must care about his own people. What happens in their minds? Are they offered so much money and so many privileges once they've sold us out? Like Ardern, a place in Harvard, she's looking at trying to go for the head of the corrupt UN. Is it the seduction of power? Is it the seduction of money that allows them to do this to their own people? What is it in your view, Michael?
If you'll notice, most of these people are very low IQ, like she is.
Very low.
And yeah.
Very.
And I mean, so the four main cheeses of recruitment, there's four main cheeses. Mice, for the mousetrap. Mice, money, ideology, coercion, ego. So money, ideology, coercion, ego. So, spies that are running operations, those are the four cheeses. And some people will fall for all four of them. Actually, if they're into the ideology, they don't need the coercion or ego or money. But actually, that's the reason I fight is ideology, right? That's why when so many people offer people like me money, this is why they kill people like us, because we don't take the money.
No.
Because we're driven internally, right? Yeah. So, but if I saw somebody that I strongly think is on my side, then I'm going to be an ally, right? Like a strong ally. But the money, ideology, coercion, ego. Most people the people are going to fall for something, will fall for one of those four cheeses or more than one. Like Trump would be money and ego, obviously he's a narcissist, and probably a lot of coercion as well. But certainly, I'm certain, he was running off to Epstein Island and whatnot, and the whole dirty life that he's read. I'm sure they probably got enough to put him in prison for centuries. But
is that why the world looks at him now with pity? Because he looks like he's on a leash. He looks so cuckolded to Israel. He really does.
Is cuckold. And he's trash. He's trash. He's a capo, right? Yeah. And he's a narcissist, right? And that's all he is. And keep in mind, when Newt Gingrich called me years ago before the first election, and he was trying to get support for Trump, and I'm like, oh, thanks, good to talk with you. How'd you get my number? Anyway, so he called me in my office in Thailand, actually. And and I said, well, I'm not going to vote for a Clinton, but you have to have somebody better than that narcissist. Seriously, Trump. I never thought, you can see, this is the thing, you can see yourself and you can see your opposite quite clearly, right? You can see people that are very similar to you, you can sense it pretty quickly, right? And your opposite, they pop off the page. That's why I have good gaydar. My sister used to say, you have the greatest gaydar in the world. It's because I'm completely not gay. So they just pop off the page to me. It's like, it's obvious. How can you not see? And so, but likewise with Trump, we're the opposite. I can see his skeleton. We're like the photo negative of each other. Yeah. That's how have I so successfully predicted Trump every step of the way? Look at anything that I've written from way back when. Throw a dart at it, and look how accurate it's turned out. How do I get that so accurate? Because I used to alligator hunt. I know how they behave, right? Trump is my opposite. I just go, what would I do? Then I pick the opposite, and he does it. He literally just does the opposite. I'm just like, okay, what would I do? Okay, what's the exact worst thing you can do here? And he does it, right? He's like taking marijuana. Yeah, he just like takes marijuana and is getting it closer and closer to legal, right? Just the things that he does is genocidal. He's a traitor. He's a straight up traitor, right? And when I was with Brett Weinstein, I think he thought that word was a little hard. I'm like, it's not hard. It's the truth, right? Listen, it's very important that we stick to truthful words. If we don't use truthful words, all else that follows is false. Cowards are natural traitors. So it takes courage to use the right words sometimes. And so when you use the word traitor, that's a big word. I realize it's a hand grenade, but it's actually objectively true, right? And the thing is if you call this thing a vaccine, which is clearly a weapon, all else that follows in the conversation will be false. you have to start with, if you're going to make water, you can't make it out of iron and sulfur. It takes hydrogen and oxygen in the right ratio, right? H2O, if we want water, that's what it is, right? Likewise, when I took Brett down to the Darien Gap and others, and I was really, he's a scientist. He's a very smart man. He's actually a Zionist, but he's an atheist Zionist. And I like Brett actually, but I talked about that. He's a scientist, so he knows about precision, right? And look at the way he talks; it's highly precise. But then when he goes on with Jordan Peterson, and they talked about the Darien Gap after I took him down there, and then they have their initial conversation, and they decide to call it migration. So then they start talking about the history of migration, and it takes you down you picked the wrong word, that means you took the wrong road. They start talking about the history of migration instead of the history of war. This is a weaponized
instead
migration.
Of the history of invasion, because it's invasion.
This is straight up warfare. Yep. This is demographic and anthropological warfare. This is absolute information war. And when you choose the wrong word, you have now gone down the wrong path. I mean, the rest of the conversation, to me, and I watched the whole thing. I'm like, Brett, what are you doing, man? I mean, seriously, this is clearly an invasion, and it's clearly a weapon. This is clearly war, and we're talking about the history of migration now. No, that's a different discussion. That's a totally different discussion, right? And it's funny. My Afghan taxi driver today sees this. He's like, yeah, they're letting us all come. I'm like, yeah, that's right.
It's so extraordinary. Tucker Carlson just gave an amazing speech at TPUSA, very, very brave, and did not hold back at all. But he said the same. It's the words that we use. You must be absolutely honest. Let's talk about Charlie.
Wait, TPUSA let Tucker talk?
Yeah, they did. They did, and there were many calls from people like obviously Shapiro to not have him talk, but they did let him talk, which is something, and that was an honouring of Charlie. So let's talk about Charlie Kirk, because this is such a fascinating piece of journalism to my mind. I was trained in law, and then I was trained in journalism, and I got disillusioned with both, Michael. And I was smiling earlier when you said, you can look at someone like your opposite in Trump and say, I would do this, so he'll do the opposite. I remember reading an article as a young lawyer, and this really experienced New Zealand lawyer, Peter Williams, said, prepare your case if you are the defense, as if you are the prosecution, and then answer all your questions. So I did think that was a really, really telling point that you made there. Look at what you would do, and then look at the enemy and say, well, they will do the absolute opposite. But I was trained there, and I realized law isn't about the truth. It's not about justice. It's about who can pay for justice. And then I moved to media using those skills, legacy media. And when I was in there, I went, oh, it's not about truth. It's about who can pay for truth. In other words, it's propaganda. And I moved on. But you look at somebody like Charlie Kirk, and you think he's such an idealist. He gave Trump this kind of golden edge in the last campaign, and compared with the sordid Kamala Harris, you thought his new blood coming through, Trump and he seem close, he will bring through a new generation, Charlie, and Trump will have to go along with his idealism rather than vice versa. So it will work out with Trump. And then we have Charlie murdered, publicly executed, and we see Trump on the leash of Israel. It has been a really disappointing end to 2025 for many people who are now totally disillusioned with Trump. Where do you stand on that Charlie Kirk idealism? Do you think that he was also starting to go, this is not what I thought it was, Israel is not what I thought it was, and maybe Trump is not what I thought he was, and thereby was murdered? Where do you stand on that public execution, Michael?
That's what it looks like. It looks like the Zionists killed him because he was going off the leash. Now, keep in mind, Pinocchio, the book, is one of the most translated books in all history, by the way. I think it might be number 3 or 4. And I think that book resonates with so many people because many people have been puppets, right? And the thing is, when Pinocchio came to life, because it was a piece of wood that had, life in it. And when he came to life, the first person that Pinocchio attacked was the person that made him, right? And so Pinocchio was a mischievous fellow. But in real life, let's say a CIA case officer, often when an agent is running actually, when a case officer is running agents, or they're spies basically, if the spy has a very strong personality, they can reverse it on him, right? Sometimes the person you're supposed to be running ends up running you, right? And this is, so Pinocchio on the strings, those strings pull both directions, right? And sometimes the puppet gets a life of its own, and it has more free will than they wanted, and then it grows. I think what happened with the Pinocchio called Charlie Kirk, and his origins are mysterious, and there's a lot of mysteries around there that I'm unclear about. Like I was out with TPUSA in Arizona, by the way. That was the first time I ever encountered them, and the only time, and they were drunk. Right? So they're supposed to be a Christian organization, and they were stone cold drunk. That was during the elections in the midterms, and I just happened to be staying in the same hotel. And
was Charlie there as well? Was he?
I didn't see him. Of course, at that time, I would not have recognized him, right?
No.
Because I wasn't a follower of Charlie Kirk, right? And so I came in from somewhere in Asia, and I thought, out of all the counties in America, where are they most likely to steal the election? And I thought Maricopa County. So I went to Maricopa, and that happened to be where they were too. And we stayed in the same hotel, which was not a coincidence, because I stayed in that hotel because that's where a lot of the political types were staying, right? Yeah. So anyway, and then they were just staggering, literally drunk and out of control, actually. And I messaged to Bannon. I'm like, what's going on here? It's like, who are these guys? Anyway, but I'll never forget that. And so then I realized they're supposed to be this Christian organization. And I told some of them, I'm like, they're counting the votes right now. This is not, the election is in question because the voting had just happened that day. It just finished hours ago. And these guys are stone cold drunk. I'm like, and you're supposed to be, anyway, so whatever.
Well, I mean, Candace Owens' journalism, I think, is extraordinary. As somebody trained in journalism, I think it's absolutely extraordinary the way she's picking the facts apart. And then you know that she's over target because of the massive propaganda campaign against her. And
my wife translated her book.
Wow.
Right, to Japanese.
She is admirable, and she's up against it. And these Judeo-Christians, we have some in New Zealand who are beyond cruel and will not listen to the facts she is putting out, but she is highlighting how shoddy and tawdry and unethical so many people in the background of TPUSA are indeed. But it's a fascinating story because it could point right, if we had decent journalists in legacy media, and we don't, it could point right to the top of this current American administration, could it not? This is a story that could
Charlie
be a
Kirk
game.
Kirk and his weird alleged wife. I mean, the whole thing is quite strange, right? It's clearly a kayfabe. Now, was Charlie Kirk actually?
What's a kayfabe?
First of all,
a kayfabe?
A kayfabe. It's a term. It's a wrestling term, and I originally heard it from Eric Weinstein. He was using that to describe a lot of how politics is. It's a wrestling term. In wrestling, kayfabe is when they're wrestling, and it can actually turn real sometimes. But it's ultimately it's a big show. But there can be real components in the show. Really, people can actually really honestly get in a fight, and it can actually be about stuff that was honestly, like some wrestler sleeps with another wrestler's wife. That's one of the examples that was given, right? Mm-hmm. And in real life, and then they get into a real fight, and people are like, "Well, that was real," but that's where it gets confusing. And so it gets confusing about the layers of deception, right? So many layers where some parts are true, and it becomes very convincing, right? And so the kayfabe, clearly a huge amount of what's going on is just actors and actresses doing their parts, right? But really, people definitely get killed. I mean, they really do get killed. So, I mean, this is a stage in which people are killed in large numbers as part of the real life rock'em sock'em routes and resources and ideology war frame, right? Information war. But when it comes to Candace, keep in mind she used to work for Daily Wire. She worked for Shapiro, right?
She did.
I mean, so I was there at Daily Wire when Masako, my wife, was interviewing her because Masako translated her book. My wife was asked to translate her book to Japanese, not because Masako is a great translator, which she is, but she was actually asked because her name will sell books in Japan because she's very well known, right? And so if her name is the translator's on there, it'll just sell books. And so I read the book, Blackout and that sort of thing. But I'm leery of the whole situation because this is we're talking multi-trillion-dollar stuff here. We're not talking billions, right? We're talking big boy stuff here. We're talking Suez Canal, Panama Canal. We're talking Rotterdam. We're talking aircraft carriers and huge oil fields and war with Venezuela. Charlie Kirk is a nothing on that scale, right? Candace Owens is a nothing on that scale. People like that are hired and fired. If they get in the way, they can be killed, right? We're talking about people that can overthrow countries and regularly do, right? And so, the amount of money that it takes to hire somebody like Joe Rogan, the dope head, and smoke dope on his show in front of millions of young people. Now, some people will say, well, he gets paid a lot of money. I'm sure how much does he make? I have no idea. Say $100 million. I have no idea. On the scale of what we're talking about, that is absolutely pocket dust, right? And, especially when what I'm getting to is to set all this stuff up and to hire these sorts of people and to have these organizations is nothing. It's just the PR department in a major thing, right? So I'm very reluctant. People keep asking me, what do I think about Erica Kirk talking with Candace Owens? I'm like, let me tell you how much time I spend on this. Zero.
Nothing.
For the same amount of time that Taiwan has been part of China, because there's other stuff going on, and I put that into the ball of kayfabe and get it out of here.
That's really interesting, but my question was, could it go right to the top of the Trump administration, embarrass him
clearly
enough to tip him over? But I don't think anything seems to penetrate that now. The Epstein files, all the rest of it. I agree with you. It's all theater. It's look at this hand, and the magician's trick, the other hand's doing all the really big stuff. So let's get back to that. Who are the hands behind the curtain, or behind that curtain? Who's controlling the communists and the UN and the all of the Islamic invasion, the all of this communist invasion? The Zionists, who controls them? And people talk about Rockefellers and Rothschilds. Somebody told me in the last election, New Zealand is a Rothschild-owned country, that they divided the world up and different countries well, that'll be mine, that'll be yours, But I still feel there's somebody behind the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers. Do you have any concept of that from all these years of deep diving, Michael?
I'm not sure if they do. And of course, I'm in Catherine Austin Fitz's studio right now, looking in her camera, right? So she and I have talked about this a lot, right? And so, obviously she knows a great deal about central banking and those sorts of components in a huge way. And some of our other collective friends are very, very knowledgeable in different components of this. Nobody seems to actually know who is the man behind the curtain, it appears to be oligarchical systems, right? Like there's the Russians, and then there's the Chinese. Keep in mind, the Chinese Communist Party has systems as well within it, right? And then there are, of course, the Zionists, which is nebulous in and of itself. There's, it's not as if any of these things are just one. They collect into one beast. I mean, you can see it's an act. For instance, let's look at the Chinese and the Zionists. They clearly cooperate. They clearly work together as frenemies, but they both know that they both want each other ultimately dead. I mean, actually dead, right? And they both know that. I mean, it's like Highlander, the movie. There can be only one, right? I mean, at the end of the day. Now, who actually is the top decision maker? I'm not sure that there actually is one. I'm not sure that there is one. Like if you look at the Taliban and how the Taliban operated, there was no king Taliban, and there's no king Jew either. Like there's no king of the Jews, right? It just doesn't exist. There's no Jewish pope, right? And that's one of the things that made the Taliban so resilient, was that they don't have a capture the flag. There's no specific town that you can take and like, hey, we got Berlin, we got Hitler. It doesn't matter, because it's like attacking a beehive that doesn't even have a hive, right? It's like it's attacking more like mosquitoes, right? That they don't have an actual hive. They're just distributed. They're all running on their own firmware. But it's clear that the World Economic Forum, as an example, is an attempt, somewhat successful, in collecting a lot of different oligarchical systems that all have their own interest, and trying to collect those interests together and get them to cooperate together towards some common goal. And of course, at the end, they're still competitors, just like, let's say, in the U.S. Army. officers that are all trying to become generals, and many that are trying to become generals. Yeah, they cooperate, they're working together, but at the end of the day too, this guy wants to get promoted more than that guy. And in business it's the same way, right? That you can have businesses that go, well, we really need to take these people out, but that's going to hurt my business, right? And so they can have internal fights, obviously, and they will. There's different. Now you look at BlackRock, obviously talking about taking. Trump was talking about BlackRock taking the Hutchison ports down in Panama. They have 2 ports on each side of Panama. China does, right? But BlackRock's not going to do that. BlackRock, and they haven't done that. BlackRock does huge business in China. That's just kayfabe. That's just nonsense. But if you ask Americans about Panama, they'll go, "Oh yeah, Trump took Panama back." I'm like, he didn't do anything. It's like, I'm down there all the time. It's like, I got messages from people in their government today. They don't do, he hasn't done anything. We've sent some troops down there. The people are, the Chinese are still, immigrating. They're still, building the bridge. They haven't finished it yet, the 4th bridge over the Panama Canal. They've finished one down the Darien Gap now. They're working on a second one in the Darien Gap. They're doing routes and resources. Panama is so important. It's up there with the Suez Canal. But for Panama, for us, Panama is our Suez Canal. Like Suez Canal, the United States doesn't in particular, we're not going to rise and fall on the Suez Canal. But on the Panama Canal, it's massively important, right, to the United States. Also, the number 3 customer is Japan. The other day I had dinner with the Japanese lawmaker here or over in Amsterdam, right? And my wife knows him from Japan. Anyway, so he's over here at this political event that I was at, and then the next day, Saturday, I took him around. Amsterdam, showing him all this dope stuff. Telling him that they're trying to bring the same companies into Japan, right? So I spent hours with him just showing him that. But at the same time, we talked about Panama, and I told him China is lining up. They're lining up their legal ducks to squeeze you. The number 3 customer through the Panama Canal is Japan. It's very important for Japan, right? And now if China ends up taking control of Panama Canal, they can squeeze you out. And this is how they're setting up to do it. If China is setting up with the rape of Nanjing and all this stuff, they're setting them up to get a legal decision that holds Japan liable to pay trillions of whatevers to China, and then China, if they take control of the Panama Canal, because I've seen this happen before, they'll squeeze them out.
They can
They'll squeeze them out.
That is so tactical. So could we reverse engineer that metaphor you so aptly gave before, that they are like a hive of bees without a beehive? They're just scattered, and that's what makes them so effective. By they, I mean the forces of darkness, because that's where all this seems to lead, is the hand behind the hand behind the hand behind the curtains. Is it a force of darkness on this earth? And we who choose to go with the forces of light, that this is a battle, as is depicted in every great movie, of light and dark when you come to earth, and you can choose which side you're on. So could we, the forces of light, simply mimic what they're doing and be decentralized as much as possible, not look for leaders, but be as brave as we can possibly be within our own circles, within our communities, with our families? In other words, Michael, to wrap this up, what is the answer? And before we do wrap, I want to talk about silver and gold, but what is the answer to this enormity of intergenerational warfare on multiple levels that you've described? And you've only touched the surface here. It's been just fascinating. What do you see as the answer? What keeps you and your gorgeous Japanese wife going when you look at the horrors that are perpetuated by humankind, one on the other? Where do you get your nourishment, your soul nourishment?
We get victories. I mean, and we succeed in a lot of the things that we do. And everybody watching this can do the same. Everybody's in a position to do something or do nothing. Because sometimes when I say or do nothing, not in the negative sense of, hey, you're not doing anything, but sometimes action is inaction, actually. For instance, if you're in a position to kind of put rust into the system of the people that are putting out rainbow flags all over the place by not forwarding a letter or something. Don't forward the letter. You know what I mean? And just don't forward the call. I read a book on subversion. I think it may have been written by the OSS back when I was in Special Forces, and it talked about actually. It had a section on what secretaries can do. What's the name of that book? And it may have been Subversion. It was like an old book. It's from the 40s or something. And have you read this book?
No, I haven't, but I'd like to. It's like the person who, I think in a very close moment, was it in Russia? And I think it was the Russian person who could have pressed the button on going nuclear, didn't. Where did I read that story?
Thankfully.
Yeah, thankfully.
Yeah.
But it can come down to a human making a good decision in a crucial situation, can't it?
Yeah, and just either helping something or hurting something, right? By, for instance, some of the suggestions in this old book were like, address, put a slightly wrong address on the envelope or whatever. So that the letter goes off to England by accident or something, It's not, or when somebody calls for your boss, just say, he's not in right now. He'll be back later. Shall I leave a message? And then never give him the message, Just things like that. Simple stuff.
It's beautiful on that person-to-person level. We will win this. Is that your view, that we, the forces of good, will win this? Or is there no winner? A friend of mine says this has been age-old and it will continue long after we are gone from this planet. What's your view?
I think it will continue. I think that's partly accurate. But there's tens of millions of us, obviously, that are fighting back. That's very clear. And so it's not like we're rare. We're not rare, and we are causing them problems. Otherwise, they would have easily won. We're clearly, not just we like you and me, but there's tens of millions of people out here who are increasingly seeing through this, and that's important. And to work and keep in mind, just because somebody has really bad thoughts and ways of viewing things now doesn't necessarily mean they're an enemy. Because, a lot of people that don't see this as an invasion now, they might call it migration, they might be a good person. They just been watching CNN. So once you actually get them out of that environment and show them things, you might say, actually, that's a really good guy. He had some pretty bad ideas, like we all did at one point. Because growth takes time, right? We don't just, there was a time when I thought vaccines were good. I used to think vaccines were really important, and then we get into this. I'm like, I'll never touch one of those things again. I didn't realize that pharma was so just horrific. I didn't realize that at all until this. So keep in mind, that late in life, before I recognized what other people recognized before I was born, right? You know what my grandmother said when I was young?
What?
She said, Michael, one day you young people will be buying bottled water out of the store, right? And she used to say that, and I used to say, Granny, I'm never going to buy bottled water out of the store. I don't know where you come up with this stuff. And she's like, I'd be like, Granny, that's crazy. And she's like, don't call me crazy. I'm like, I would never say my grandmother's crazy, she's like, Michael, you read a lot of those books and you should keep on reading them. I'll buy you more. But just remember, your granny's been on this world a long time. And I'm telling you, one day you'll be buying bottled water out of the store. Can you imagine every bottle of water I ever pick up for all my life? I think about what my grandmother told me, right? And I mean, so that's every single day. I'm like, she told me, and I thought it was crazy, right? But at some point, I mean, I wish I had a video camera on her every minute of her life. I would be replaying the tapes right now. This is Granny Alex Jones. But what I'm getting to is it was that and so many other things are a long awakening, right? And some are much more important than that, obviously. So we have to be careful not to alienate potentially really good people that are still on the other side on some things. Yeah. We might be able to show them, and we certainly can in many cases, bring them to the water, and they actually will go, yeah, you're right. Actually, I now see it, right? So we have to be careful not to alienate them or, treat them as enemies when they really just have a different opinion.
It's really beautiful what you said, that so many are wakening up. And some people say this is an unprecedented time in human history. So maybe this part, before we talk about gold and silver briefly, I just want to end on this. I've been sent this tape, which I'll put in here, which is, I haven't had a chance to send it to you. It was just before we came on air. It's just saying this is a time of mass human awakening to a far different level of a sort of energy level of existence on this earth. And that is painful. It's like when a woman gives birth, she knows there's going to be a certain measure of pain as the baby comes through the birth canal. And I
Hmm.
can bear this because I'm so excited about what is to come, this beautiful being that is
Yeah.
being birthed into the world. So are we in that birth canal right now, Michael? Do you think this is going to go to something that has not been seen before on this earth? Is there that potential, or is that, again, that Liz idealism coming in? I don't know. I feel something's birthing that's different.
Yeah, clearly there's potential. Otherwise, you and I and Misako and so many others, we wouldn't even be fighting.
Yeah.
And we
Yeah.
do this 7 days a week. We can clearly see that there is a light at the end of the tunnel. It's hard. I mean, we're going to have to keep slogging. We keep on going. And the difference between success and failure often is the ability to be the last man standing, right?
Yes.
And keep in mind, the nature of the beast is it fights itself too, right? So one of the things, like they don't trust each other. They don't have any in-group trust at all because they know, like Trump knows he's not trustworthy, and therefore he won't trust anybody. And the Zionists are completely untrustworthy, and they won't trust it. That's why they have to enforce things with guns, right? That's why because there's no moral enforcement. There's nobody that's going to go, oh man, I feel bad. I didn't get something done. It's not like that at all. They don't feel bad about anything except not making enough money and don't have enough power. Maybe, yeah, we can definitely. One of the ways is to help them fight each other as well. I mean, let them expend their energy fighting each other, instead of us fighting each other.
That's brilliant. And that's so interesting. They are so frightened of Christianity, to get back to that NZ, New Zealand Defence Force documentation. They want to crush Christianity so much. And that tells us all there must be great power there. There must be great power in linking into that source of goodness, because they wouldn't go after it so hard if there wasn't. So here's this tape.
You can't destroy goodness. You can't.
Yes.
You can't destroy. I don't think we can destroy evil either, but we can certainly beat it back out of our neighborhood, right? We can beat it hard, right? I was over in Armenia with some missionaries, and I was asking, what is evil? Because I want to be able to more effectively fight it, and I haven't quite figured out, exactly what it is. And actually, Chuck Colton said something like, evil basically, its habit basically is death, right? It moves to death, like whether that's drugs or just, and I think we know what it means. We know it when we see it. It's like art. We know art when we see it. We know evil when we see it, right? But evil, but good is like gold. You can't destroy gold. You can't destroy it. It just, you do whatever you want with it. Burn it, smash it with a hammer, throw it in acid. It doesn't matter. You can't destroy gold. Throw it in a volcano. It's still going to be gold. Gold is amazing, and good is like that too. You can't destroy it.
I think you're having a bit of a good Christmas with the run on silver at the moment. I just wanted to briefly talk about silver, and we'll put the pieces that you sent me this week about silver. But just for people who are not aware, silver has been massively undervalued for so long. It's now being essential, really, for the whole military-industrial complex. So they're admitting they need it. But humans need it if we want to protect our family assets, don't they? Where's your stance on the current run of silver and gold, but silver primarily?
Yeah, silver, platinum, and palladium, they're all going up. Obviously silver is outrunning gold. I'm not an expert on metals. I'm not at all, but I've been paying a lot more attention to them as time goes on, realizing, gold is actual money and silver is actual money as well, and also industrial. But it's funny when people, pushing the Bitcoin or like gold is, it's not, it's a relic of the past, I think is what Warren Buffett or somebody said. I'm like, gold. I go all over the world. And let me tell you what, you go to Asia, you go to China, you go to Vietnam, Thailand, Indonesia, India. I mean, gold is absolute money, right? And it's not going away. And silver.
And your Afghan taxi driver today, when you explained about silver, he got it straight away, didn't he? Where a lot of Westerners are asleep at the wheel, but he's not.
Oh, I brought it to a Pashtun taxi driver from Kandahar, right? And so we started talking about silver. And he's like, where can I buy this? He
Yeah.
started looking online. He's just like looking, he's going to buy 100 ounces, which is, like $7,000 almost, right? And I said, you should buy it right now, man. Go buy it as soon as you drop me off. Don't wait, because tomorrow it's probably going to be a little higher. Because silver is going through the roof. And again, I'm not an expert. What I am good at is picking out who I should listen to. So because most of the fields in the world, we no matter how hard you study, we're going to have a very narrow amount of bandwidth in our whole life, no matter how hard you study. So one of your basic skill sets has to be knowing how to read people and who to listen to, right? So I started listening very hard on silver and gold in recent years, and I'm very happy I did, right? And I'm not giving any investment advice. I'm just saying silver is very, very shiny, and it's very nice. It's a very nice metal now,
It's
and
a
so is gold, but silver's nicer
It's
for
a
now.
lovely way to end the broadcast that's going to Christmas. Give yourself a Christmas present, get some silver. We'll put the pieces that Michael sent to me underneath this interview. What a delight to talk to you, Michael Yon. I could have talked for another hour easily or more, but and I very much look forward to meeting your wife one day too. And one day my dream would be to sit in that library of yours and just be left alone to read.
Oh,
I would
come
love
visit.
it.
You'll get lost in these books. Most
I
of them
would
are
love
way
that.
over 100 years old. I mean, the
Wow.
new books are like 100 years old. I mean, it's a very serious library, right?
I'd love to do this again in the new year. Talk to you more then. But Michael Yon, Merry Christmas. Have a wonderful holiday. You've deserved it. And thank you. Thank you for all your work you do to help.
Merry Christmas.